Good afternoon. First question is whether I wear my glasses so I can see you, or I take them off so I can see my notes, and I think it'll be the latter. Uh, Land Securities is the largest property company in the UK. We develop and manage common shopping centres, retail parks, large offices, and increasingly residential property. And I'm going to look at this from the client's point of view. So we're not providing the offsets. Is it something we should go into? And about 5 years ago, one of our major rivals announced that they would be going carbon neutral. About 2 weeks later, we put out a carefully worded statement that tried to say we didn't agree with that approach for several reasons that I'll outline now. I've since learned also that they were only looking at the energy that would be used in association with the common parts of their buildings, and that's not the entire picture. As we're now finding with the carbon reduction commitment, commercial buildings have a large amount of their energy used by the occupiers of those buildings, and we feel that as the designers and landlords of those buildings, we have a responsibility, a stewardship role in making sure those buildings work efficiently. So we think that the carbon footprint of our estate has to include all that energy, not just the common parts. So had we offset, it would also be more expensive than the approach they were going down. But I also think that offsetting has a real risk, and whether there's a scientific basis for this or not, I don't think matters. It has a real risk of being seen by outside observers as a quick fix, a cheap way out, and just offsetting your guilt. In other words, you can pollute as much as you like, but as long as you buy the offset, you can do what you like. And I think that's a real risk, and there's a reputational value. And if you've got a reputation as a leader in sustainability, which I believe we have, you can lose that reputation very quickly, even though it's taken 30 years for us to get there. The statement we put out said, actually, we think there is a place for offsetting, but it shouldn't be seen as the silver bullet. And in fact, I think in everything to do with property and other sectors, there aren't silver bullets. The answer to carbon reductions has to be a mix of technologies and approaches. And we think it starts, for our sector, but you can apply this to all other sectors, with the product. The product for us is buildings. How do we design those buildings and build them to be as energy efficient as possible? We then go on to the operation of the building, so that's equivalent to the lifetime operation of a fridge or a vacuum cleaner. How do we operate those buildings? And that's the key. 98% of the building stock remains year on year, so you have to look at the existing buildings rather than just new build, which is where the legislation focuses. We've had energy management in place in-house since 1981. We've been tackling this on an ongoing basis, and just this week we've announced a new target over the next 10 years for a 30% CO2 reduction by 2020. So we're tackling this quite seriously and in depth, despite the CRC, which for our sector starts to impose the same sort of restriction that I mentioned earlier with regard to offsetting for only the common parts, in that we don't have control over the energy that's used by our occupiers. So the polluter pays principle is slightly evaded. But as you go beyond that, you've done the product, you've done the operation. The next thing we look at is how we provide the energy, so that could be through combined heat and power or some sort of district energy scheme. Beyond that, we then go to renewables, either on-site or off-site, and as the last thread, we look to offsetting. And as I explained at the start, we'd only be interested in offsetting where we have full control of the energy usage, and that actually, despite our massive portfolio, is only in two areas. One, our own head office, fairly self-evidently, and secondly, the common parts of shopping centres, where we have total control over the airflow, the heating if there's heating or cooling, the lighting, etc. If I refer back to the shopping centres, about 4 years ago we started to offset. We worked out the energy used for the common parts, turned that into CO2, went to the carbon neutral company and bought offsets at around £8 a tonne. We specifically didn't use the words carbon neutral. I managed to get our chief executive to ban those words, but we offset. And the reason we did it was twofold. One, to raise awareness amongst our own staff of the importance of energy efficiency. And secondly, to encourage the centres to take measures to reduce their carbon footprint so that their offset costs in future years will be reduced. The awareness level went up, but the second part didn't happen at all. And when quizzed why, they said, well, any money we did have, you've already taken for offsetting, so we haven't got anything else left. So we changed it. 2 years ago, we went to a process where we still measured their energy, we worked out what it would cost to offset, we took the money off them and then said, you can have it back if you put in place a scheme on site that will save utilities and therefore reduce your carbon footprint. Not surprisingly, they all went for that option. And as a quick summary, we spent just over £150,000 in that year, which was 2008-9. The estimated savings were 5,000 tonnes over 10 years. The cost of carbon per tonne just on the saving was £29 a tonne, which compared to the £8 from the carbon neutral company doesn't look good maths. But when you then factor in the savings you're making through not buying the energy, it worked out at a negative cost of £162 a tonne. In other words, even our finance director understood why we were doing it. All that money goes back to the occupiers in reduced service charges. So from our point of view, it was a really successful scheme. We extended it during the year just gone so that centres could have an opportunity to do bigger projects. If, for example, they had £5,000 pot, but they wanted to do an £8,000 project, they could bank the money this year, add it to next year's money and do the project in year 2. The schemes that have been coming in for this year show that they've learnt from the first year. That £29 a tonne reduction cost is now down to £6 a tonne reduction cost, and the energy savings are in excess of a negative benefit of £200 a tonne. So from our point of view, offsetting now isn't an option in that approach. We'll do it on site, and we're making real reductions, and we're reducing the occupation cost for our occupiers. We do still offset for our own head office, although we're taking steps to reduce the energy consumption there. We've just relocated some of our staff back in, so we're looking at voltage optimizers, we're looking at solar PV, we've retrofitted the lifts with a 75% energy saving, and we'll carry on doing that. But we think that offsetting from our point of view, the only other two areas we're looking at now, printing and travel, which are really outside our control about how the energy is used. So from our point of view, we'd say seriously look at what you can do yourselves, because actually behind the upfront cost there might be enormous benefits to you in actually taking these measures yourself on site. Thank you.